in talent acquisition, you can clearly see that you need to be very data-driven to be successful.
Welcome to The Executives, the show where we navigate in the intricate world of executive leadership, exploring strategies, insights, and personal stories of successful professionals shaping the global business landscape. I'm your host, Majid, and joining us today is Matthias, who has over 13 years of experience in talent acquisition. Matthias has been responsible for employer branding, creating candidate-centric requirement processes, and community building, and has worked for companies like Zalando, Scout24 Group, and Beamery. He has also won the TA Leader EMEA for small markets in 2023. Currently, Matthias works at emnify as the Global Senior Director, Talent, and an executive member of the Hire community. Hello and welcome to the show, Matthias.
Thanks. Thank you for having me, and very happy to be here.
So tell us more about Matthias. I'm always struggling with experienced people trying to bring everything like very compact, like 2-3 lines. So maybe tell us more about who is Matthias.
Yeah, Matthias is a very passionate talent acquisition leader, and who has been working in big corporates as well as in startups or scale-ups. And his passion is literally to build successful companies. And by building successful companies, one of the key factors of that is, people. People, how do we attract people? How do we hire people? How do we engage people? How do we retain people? And this is something that, I'm very, very passionate about and trying to help organizations to become better in.
Interesting, because people run organizations, right? I mean, from top to bottom, it's always people. Oftentimes, when you're talking with an engineer, they are confused that what does an HR or people's person do? Because they're like, yeah, my goals are set with my manager, right? So, and surprisingly, I was getting a lot of requests from people that, hey, bring in someone from talent acquisition, because we have people who like talent acquisition people, and then we have people who hate talent acquisition people, because they get rejected, and then which is normal, right? So, and I was like, cool. Then we met at a conference, and I was like, I loved talking to you that day, and I was like a perfect guy to answer the questions that we are being bombarded with. So the topic we have for discussion is why we need to change talent acquisition now. The transition from talent acquisition to talent. It's something I'm very curious about. But before we jump into the topic, I would love to understand what is emnify.
Emnify is a deep tech IoT startup located in Berlin. It's operating globally. We are roughly about 200 people working around the world. And what is the product doing literally? It's an IoT connectivity solution. That means we are trying to connect data from one hardware to another through SIMs, right? And we are very focused on mobile providers, right? The typical big telecom providers. But nowadays, we're also going to satellite. So that's super interesting. So how do we use this? And how do we also manage this when SIMs disappear? Super, super interesting topic, right? Probably all of us have heard about eSIMs before. And that's the space we are operating in.
Mm-hmm. eSIMs is actually becoming very cheap. I was surprised. Like my brother was actually traveling to UK and he didn't have a SIM. Very easy, paid directly online. As soon as he landed, he had internet, so he could make phone calls. He could do a lot of his normal activities. It was super, super good, so it's a cool industry. So let's now start talking about the topic because I'm really interested. So you're in talent acquisition. It's for me one of the hardest jobs, like finding the right people and finding the right people. So what was your motivation to actually pursue a career in talent acquisition?
Yeah, it always starts with your personal stories, right? That you experience pretty much in the beginning of your career. When I looked at my education, my bachelor education was nothing near to HR, or business administration. My bachelor education was actually political economics, So it's a completely different scope, but it combined social science, law, and economics. So I was very much down to that path to say, governmental organizations that are doing policies, etc., etc. This is what I want to influence. But through that part of my career or that studies, I really love this interdisciplinary approach. You're looking at one problem and you have different views on and science, academia, to solve that problem. That really, I enjoyed that a lot. And then I thought, why don't I start working in a company? I had no clue what jobs there are, what it exists, how people work. And when I started there, I did an internship and then got my first career experience as a recruitment consultant. I was very fascinated of the people that I interviewed and the people that I talked to, how they have changed the game in their industries. Yeah. And literally, what I then also experienced is how broken recruitment is. Yeah. I mean, oh my God, I feel like the amount of processes that I have been in that were disrespectful, very biased, interrogations. Sometimes even I would say, they play these mind games to say, oh, can you ask this or that? The brain teaser questions, everybody knows them, right? So it was shocking. Yeah. So for me, then I went back to say after my first year experience to go to do my master in human resource management. So Master of Science. I studied labor law there. I studied also people development and, got a much broader picture in terms of what HR or people can do. And then when I started my career, literally people said to me, look, here's a problem. We need to hire so and so many engineers. We need to scale up that. Please do that with me. Yeah. Or do that for us. And then I learned about technology, how technology plays a role, how you can actually hire people fast if you are not just focused in one area, but in multiple different locations. And yeah, that gave me a little bit the passion to say, look, there's a broken environment I can fix. What is missing in this environment that recruitment back then was for people who just get an entry job and then pursue a career in HR. But nobody really looked at recruitment as an own profession. Yeah. Everybody said, yeah, everybody can do this, just talking to people, what matters, right? And because of that, and that was 10 years ago or 15 years ago, because of that, because we treated recruitment very poorly in organizations. We did not have best practices. We did not use a lot of technology. It was a broken place. Yeah. Then throughout my career, I've seen that I couldn't learn from leaders. There were not so many leaders that actually gave people, recruiters, some best practices in hand and told them this is how good looks like, right? And so with all of that, and then the growing importance of talent acquisition for organizations, it just became an own career path suddenly and a profession that actually matters. Yeah. And so this is why I was very fascinated, to answer your question now, by the people I talk to, how broken the environment is, and how much we can mature that space. And this is what kept me until now actually going to improve the space.
Interesting. You mentioned a lot of cool things. Like, for example, things were broken. So recruitment processes were biased. And then also you mentioned technology. And now recently we have seen technology is evolving so fast, so fast. Talent acquisition would have also evolved, right, with the passage of time. So how has the whole talent acquisition process actually evolved with this tech evolvement?
I would look first of all more in talent acquisition, not so much at process for now, because processes then is for me the second layer, how you execute things. But in talent acquisition, you can clearly see that you need to be very data driven to be successful. This data, most of the time, comes from tooling. Yeah, that means you need to understand what kind of tooling do I need to get certain kind of data points. And then also with the rise of AI, for example, a really big thing, or language learning models, we have seen that our technology or tooling that the usual TA professional works with has AI features, right? So there are a lot of AI ways of how we work right now with our approaches to get less administrative and more focus on things that matter. By focus on things that matter is, can we coach and enable the business to make the right decision? Can we give them more data in order to make a data-driven decision and not just a gut feeling decision, right? So these are things that I have seen evolving. And at the same time, what we need to put into context here is what happened in the environment, in the business. Yeah. So we had a pandemic. A lot of companies were hiring like crazy. We have, blown up the headcount for business models that actually don't make any sense. So we had way too much people for the actually cause of what we are trying to solve here. And this led to, of course, layoffs, right? And this also means that we are in the situation, especially TA, has suffered quite a lot around the world in order to of the layoffs. And that means we are at the phase of time now, and that's why we need to change, where we are confronted with do more with less, which everybody part of the business is confronted with. So that's not a TA problem, but we need to do it in a way that we say, let's not focus on quantity anymore. Let's really go down to quality. Yeah. And how quality is achieved in our results is then where the profession will now kind of change, because not so many people focused on quality back in the days. Yeah. And this is a very particular point where we can, with the help of technology and AI, focus on quality outcome. But that also means in order to achieve this, you need to have the right leaders in place that understand how to work with this. So I'll give you one example. If you don't know how to embrace and leverage technologies these days, and it starts with your own technologies in your own area, you will be made redundant, yeah, in the next 6 to 12 months, yeah, easily, because people and the business and C-level, they want to see results. They want to see a measure of success. They want to see, look, what are you doing here? How do you measure this? Stop with the fluffy stuff, right? And this is where I think this is one of the reasons why TA will change forever, actually.
TA has been evolving a lot. Like, for example, TA has also like a very strong role in portraying the business. Whenever someone from talent acquisition reaches out to me, hey, Majid, we work for this company, and we want to hire someone in product management or so on. My first question is towards their brand. Like, tell me more about the employer brand, which brings me to my next question. What are the components that actually make a strong employer brand, considering we have companies like Amazon or Google, which have a lot of money, versus these small companies, startups,
So first things first, I think what makes a strong brand? A lot of people will tell you a lot of different stuff. For me, it's authenticity. Yeah. So do I understand what this company stands for and the people, what kind of values or what kind of culture they stand for? And is there a consistency in there? Why do I say this? Is because I think in the past, and this was a big mistake in my view from a lot of employer branding professionals around the world, is we have created fake images of companies that actually tell a story that is not true. So that means we are from the outside look fantastic places to work for. And then suddenly, once you're in the interviews, in the best case, or even when you start in the worst case, you realize, look, this is a completely different space. Yeah. And this is where I would say we need to be authentic to what we stand for in order to attract the right talent. Because look, in the end of the day, what is branding all about? It targets a certain type of people, right? And this certain type of people are then either attracted or not. But in the end of the day, we'll exclude more people than we actually include, right? Because there's a certain type of people that we need. So tech companies will probably speak more to tech people, to a certain industry, to a certain seniority level. And that's the people we want. And what we are seeing in the market and in our TA game is it's broken because everybody applies for everything. And then we create bad experiences. And then we are not satisfied of, hey, why was I rejected? Well, because maybe you're not the people that we attract, right? Or we want to attract. And I think this is one part where we need to say, okay, authenticity starts with what is the key differentiators for organizations? What is it? Is emnify different than an N26 or a Zalando or than a whatever? Yeah. We need to understand what we stand for and what makes it special to work for us. And a lot of organizations have a hard time with that because first, they haven't thought about it, or second, they just use the same phrases that everybody else is using. And then if there is no differentiation, then of course, what could you expect? Then people just apply for what they see and what they hear, and and this is why I think what was very good in the layoff situation that we have been confronted with is that people start suddenly to challenge people about the business model, the cash flow, the revenue growth. Why now? That should have been always a conversation or question that we should ask people for. Like, what are you standing for? How do you run your business? Can I have a look? Where do I see the numbers, right? I want to understand that this is a sustainable space. So yeah, I think to cut it down, it's really what do you stand for, the authenticity, the employer experience, the company culture, and the leaders in the end, because it's not about a company anymore. It's the people that work in the company that will attract the right people. You want to work with great people. That's why you join. You're not only focus on the company. The company is the overall picture, but the people, these are the people that matter more.
That's very, very true, because I have, like, there are a few people who I really look up to, like my mentors and so on. I've worked with them as reporting to them. And if they call me any day, hey, Majid, I'm looking for this profile. Are you interested? My answer would be, without thinking, yes. I would compromise on salary, on a lot of things, designation, everything. But because I know them, I can trust them. And the thing is, like, last few years, like you mentioned, people were more interested in like numbers. Like whenever you talk to a talent acquisition person, I hired 3,000 people, 5,000 people, and the question when we first I met, also we were discussing that how many are still working in the same company,
Yeah, exactly. And I think I'm obsessed with numbers, don't get me wrong. But there is a difference of what kind of KPIs you set. And I think this is another part where I see we need to change is for a very long time, TA professionals around the world set the wrong KPIs because they believe that's the measurement of success. And this is where it all starts. Yeah. And then the people like, yeah, but everybody else does it. Yeah. Because, well, if you copy and paste everything what everybody else is doing, that's not flying. Yeah, just because Google did it, it does not mean it will be successful at emnify, right? And so people need to stop doing this and start actually be much more aware of how do I solve problems. Yeah, and when you start solving problems, you need to understand, first of all, what are the root causes of the problem in order to fix the problem and not the other way around. You cannot just say per default, I take all of those best practices and just apply it exactly like they did it because that's the measurement of success. No, it's not, right? So I think this is a little bit where I'm coming from. We need to start to look at KPIs that measure success in a meaningful way, because a lot of people that I hear in talent acquisition are saying, oh, we don't know how to create the value. We are not respected in the organization. We don't have the reputation for it. But how do you position yourself? How do you position yourself to create value in an organization? And one of the first things is to understand, okay, what are the company goals? What do they want to achieve? How do they want to make the next step? And then look at your line of work, and how can you contribute to this? And I think this is where it sometimes even starts, that the connection to business strategy and TA strategy is not there.
Yep, that's very true, because I've seen so many companies just like reaching out that we are hiring. And then my first question is, like, how many people did you lay off during the last 2 years? If because they can't put everyone as bad performance. If they say restructuring, then I question, okay, cool, why did you restructure? That means you might restructure again, and then I'm a little reluctant, and I have said so many times no to companies where I read the news that they laid off people, and after 3-4 days I was reached out by a talent acquisition person. Hey, we are looking for a product person. And I'm like,
yeah,
I just read the news that you laid off people. Why are you hiring? Like, stop.
And this is a wonderful comment, actually, by the way, because what then people said in the pandemic as well was, the way you treat people in the pandemic was the biggest employer branding campaign that you could have done, right? Or the way you lay off people is the biggest employer branding campaign, because if you treat them fairly and you care about them, this is already employer branding. And going back to what are the strong components that we talked about, it's the way you treat people. In the end, that's something that will stick. And that is something where I even think sometimes in recruitment processes. So we had this one case recently, but this is for me best practice is like if you reject people, they still have a great candidate experience and then start referring people to you because of that experience. That is the best practice. That is what we need to seek for, right? Because we treat people with respect. They have learned something maybe in their journey, and then they start referring other people to you. That's imagine the network effect behind it, right?
Exactly, because the thing is, people often companies don't realize that I will sit with my friends, and the best topic to talk is, or the first question we ask is, how is your job? And if someone brings up the topic, oh, I got laid off. Why? We forget everything else, and we start, okay, why? Let us see if we can help you. Let us ask in our companies if there is a job. Literally, I'm talking from experience. This is what has happened in the last few months. Like literally, someone telling every time we sit down, yeah, I lost my job. I lost my job. Why? Don't know. Restructuring. And I was like, what are these companies doing? Like, yeah, there are companies. I'm not saying all companies are bad. I have seen some really smart people as well. Like, for example, I met this guy. He was not so big, like 70, 75 people. So he was struggling. He was in consulting business and they were really struggling. Was in the beginning of the pandemic, automation company, industrial automation. So what happened was, because when COVID came, everything shut down. Everything was shut down. The industries was actually sealed, so they were not allowed to go. So he actually said that I am not going to fire anyone. I can assure you, because I will reduce the salaries of the C-level people. That's a big step. All offices are cancelled. If you want to work from home, because we are not going to pay rent. We have to save money, because if you're not making enough, then we have to be smart. But on the same time, I see companies doing the exact opposite. They're laying people off, and then they're telling in these interviews that, hey, you know what, we have the best fruit when you come to the office. I'm like, I can buy fruit myself. I get paid a salary, right? So for me, buying apples that cost €3 is not a problem. So it's you know it's a bit of a weird situation right now. But I mean, there are good people as well, good companies as well, which are trying to actually support their own people.
Yeah, I have another example, because, and this is what, they will be remembered for, right? Because I have a friend of mine that also struggled, and he saw layoffs coming. He's a leader in his profession, and he then said, "Look, I'm going to raise my hand because if they save my salary, they will not lay off other people, right? So instead of me, sticking until the end, I would just say, look, I see this is not going to fly. Let me be the first volunteer so that other people might keep their jobs." And these are things you will be remembered for as a leader. And this is exactly when you then say, this person calls me up and I remember he did this for me because he saved my job. I will always be, thankful and grateful. And I think, there are such actions that not so many people sometimes talk about, but these are the stories that also tell you what real leadership is all about, right?
Like when we sit also, right, we don't, like, I've noticed human nature is like this, that we talk more negative than positive. Like when you're sitting with friends, you will not hear from a guy saying, my manager made me take the day off on my birthday. It's a nice gesture. It doesn't cost the company anything, but it's a simple nice gesture. But we will talk about the company laid off, the manager was a douchebag, and
Yeah, 100%.
but recruitment comes with challenges, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you have been touching some challenges when you're implementing recruitment or digital recruitment. So what are the practical strategies that you actually suggest anyone, startup or corporate, for overcoming these challenges, especially in a time when we are very focused on digital recruitment?
First thing that I do when I come into an organization, so most of the time people tell me is a very compelling and interesting story in the recruitment process. No, recruitment is fine. We don't need to worry about everything's perfect. And then when you sit there, you'd be like, oh my God, what's going on? Yeah. So one of the things that I would really look into is, of course, data. Yeah. And that starts with the ATS because that's our core system in recruitment, right? How much is this set up correctly? can I get all the information out of the system? If I cannot do that, this is already the first issue, right? If people cannot tell me what's the time to hire, what is the quality per hire, bless you, how many people have we hired, how many people from which country are they from, which sources did they have, how much money we spend. Like, you go through the whole journey and you clearly then see, look, there are some unanswered questions, right? Because for whatever reason, this is not working. And then this will already trigger some conversations, because if you cannot answer basic questions, then there is an area for improvement. Once we assume that we have a system that has all the data in place, then you would probably figure out based on the funnel analysis. And here I talk about data analysis, right? I literally say, if you do an audit, you are looking at quantitative and qualitative data. You do interviews, you understand what the perception of things are, you are trying to understand what are the core problems, because no matter how TAs is set up, a C-level will probably tell you, Matthias, we need better people. We need better people than we have right now. Our productivity is down, performance is down, etc., right? But then if you dive into this topic, a lot of people cannot tell you what that means. Oh, so you measure productivity. So what kind of uptick do you need? Well, that depends on which department do you look at. So you don't have a company productivity formula? No, not really. Okay, what does a high performer in your area look like? That's a great question. I don't even know. I mean, we laugh at this now, right? But this is the kind of lack of definitions and measurements that actually, as a recruiting leader, I am confronted with, and people put these problems that they have into my space and say, fix it, Matthias. So that means in talent acquisition, they'd be like, yeah, we want to increase our quality per hire. Okay. Do we measure it? No. Okay. How do we understand what are the performance criteria in this organization? Well, we don't have any. It's like, okay, fair enough. So how, if you cannot explain to me what good looks like, how can I ensure that I meet what good looks like? Yeah. And so this is another dimension that I would go down. And then if we fix data, if we fixed a bit the tooling, but also a little bit the approach of what is actually expected from you, then we probably talk about how capable are our leaders. Yeah, and by leaders, I mean most of the time, 85% of the time, leaders are my hiring managers, right? And so they will, in their interactions, not just with my team, but pretty much also with candidates, yeah, create a certain image of this company in their interactions, in their interviews, in the way they prepare the interviews as well, or the way they act. And here I am a big believer to say, we sometimes complain about hiring managers, and you see this very often, TA versus hiring managers. You mentioned this, right? In the beginning of this podcast, you said, like, look, I know so many that are so sick and tired of TA people, and some are in favor of them because there are different experiences here. And I think for me, it's not hiring managers versus TA. For me, it's hiring as a team sport. Yeah. And if you think about your best team or the team that you are in favor of, how do they as a team perform? How do they work together to be successful? And then ask yourself the question, am I working with my recruiter as a team together? And do we have shared responsibilities? Do we have shared measurements of success? And if we do, if we don't, that's a problem, because then you're not a team. But if you do, how can we achieve this? Yeah. How can you say, I need to hire 15, 20 people, and you say, look, Matthias, how can I ensure that we have a quality per hire? How do we track this? How do we measure this? What do you need from me? How is my candidate experience score? Do you measure hiring manager satisfaction? Do you measure also recruiter satisfaction? Because look, if I satisfy all the needs of the hiring managers, but it's a horrible experience for a recruiter, guess what? Yeah, candidate experience will not drive, because you have multiple different experiences, right? So you have a candidate, a recruiter, and a hiring manager. And if one is shitty, the other is good, it makes a mediocre candidate experience. Yeah. So you want to achieve both experience to be great in order to actually create a great candidate experience. And so, as you can already see, there's a lot of those areas where I would say fix the systems, fix the expectations, work with people together, make it a shared responsibility, because then you have a mature hiring culture. And then on top of all of that, it's then really how do you communicate? Yeah. Communication is key, especially for TA people. I feel like we're not just talking outreaches, we also talk about how do we communicate as a company into this market, what kind of stories do we tell? This is all the engaging part, but also if people start being hired, right? What's happening after that? I think engagement is great. So we are kind of making sure that everyone before, 1 month before they start, that they have communication flows, that they know what you need to be set up. You do some admin work even before you even start, so that you focus on the moments that matter when you start, right? And we measure this by an EMPA or an NPS score. And we can proudly say the first week and even the first month, we have a score plus 70, yeah, out of 100. So that's not too bad in that sense. But look, this is all about, we're in an age where we measure experiences, and experience lead to success, right? And if people have a bad time at work, or have a bad time in a process, or have a bad time in an onboarding part of their life cycle, then we are not successful in what we do.
Yeah, that's very true. Very, very true. I mean, I've used this example of experience with a very good friend of mine. He was struggling because he had a job description, 2+ years experience in product, only 2 lines, 2+ years experience, willing to start immediately. And then he got like 300 applications or something really quickly, because 2 years is nothing. The talent acquisition lady was super, super good, like super good. And this guy comes to me, Majid, I have a problem with the TA. I was like, okay, what's the problem? Oh, yeah, she's bringing too many people, but none of them are good. I'm like, okay, show me the job description. Because the hiring manager wrote the job description. He showed me. I was like, if I read this, I'm not even going to apply. The problem I see without even seeing applications is you're getting too many people who are not experienced. He's like, yeah, how do you know? I'm like, because your job description is vague. I mean, you did not tell your TA what kind of people do you need, what kind of industry do you need the people in. And he was complaining about it. And then the TA also said the same, that I have no idea what he wants. Like whenever I sit with this guy, he just says, yeah, find me a senior product manager, senior product. Who, what, why? Like, so, and the thing is, then after that, the lady told me he has 11 interviews, 11 1-hour interviews. Imagine a candidate with 7-8 years experience. You make them go through 11 interviews. They will lose their interest very quickly. Yeah, yeah. In German we say bescheuert, yeah.
Yeah, but look, and what is so interesting in your story here is the definition of what good looks like again, right? So that's one part. The second part is, if I don't know what good looks like is, of course, every opinion counts, and then I make people go through multiple hubs until I feel like, well, if 10 people say yes, it must be good, right? Because then if they don't turn out to be great, I can go back to the 10 people and say, well, but you guys did not help, right? And I think with a job description, yeah, one advice, because we're also aiming for tangible outcomes and takeaways for people here. For me, the responsibility of a job description is with TA. Yeah. So of course, hiring managers can give their input, highly welcome, right? It's very important. But then we need to be in the driver's seat to say, look, this is what you want. This is what the market looks like. Now let's combine this as much as possible so you get what you want. Because in the end of the day, the responsibility of a TA professional is to say, well, you have a job. Here I present you 5 candidates. I wrote a scorecard and the reason why they are great. And then you please interview them and get back to me if this is really something you need. And if it's not, it's also totally fine. But then tell me why they're not good. Give me reasons. Let's iterate on this and then do this step by step. I think most of the time when you see really professional TA processes or hiring processes, people can close roles with 5 to 10 people, not more.
Mm.
5 to 10 people. Yeah. And keep this in mind when you do your funnel analytics. It's like, it's not about the amount of people that you have.
Mm.
And this is sometimes I see as another problem, that people make up their mind what they need after they have talked to 10 candidates. No, do your homework. So in this intake meeting, so what we, for example, do, another advice here is business cases. We let leaders write business cases of why they need to hire that person. And we go really down to, what are your goals? 30, 60, 180, 3, 6, 9, 12 months. What is the success factor here? How does it increase the top line or the bottom line? Yeah. And ask me, I would say, difficult questions, not mean questions, but difficult questions to really validate, because so many times I've seen, especially in startup and scale ups, oh, I need a person. Yeah, let's do this. And then in the end of the day, they'd be like, oh, I don't have budget for it. Oh, I actually don't even know how they contribute to our goals, right? And this is where it starts, because the more information you have as a TA professional, the more you can give and share this to candidates, and the more you intrigue them. Because look, if I have a conversation with you, if you want to join us, you ask me that question, what does success look like? How can I contribute to this? How does your performance work, right? How do I know how your bonus structure works? These questions need to be answered. And if you cannot say that so many times, to be like, oh, I don't know. Oh, I need to ask somebody else. I mean, it's fine if people don't know certain things. But at least you as a candidate need to get the answer to your questions within 24 hours. If not, they are not serious or they don't know what they do.
No, that's very true, because I can give you an example. It was some time back, I was interviewing for a company. So they sent me this complicated phrase of an ESOP in the offer letter, which was really complex to understand. I write back to the guy, the CPO. I was like, hey, I understand everything, but I don't understand this clause. So the guy was a gentleman. He basically replied, Majid, even I don't understand this, but give me a day. Give me a day and I will give you the answer. He said, because our ESOPs are different. Like we are like the people who started before have a simpler thing. So he said, I need to verify that. And 3 hours, 4 hours later, I think it was like 8 p.m., 9 p.m., he replied with the answer. He said, yeah, it is the way it's formulated is very complex. So this is what it means. And I understood then. So I was like, at the end, I didn't take that offer. Don't judge me for that, but but it was. I mean, it was helpful. So, but when we first met, and also you believe that talent acquisition needs to change, right? You also mentioned a lot of challenges that we have from both perspectives, employer perspective and also the candidate. So, why do you think we need to change talent acquisition now?
Yeah, good question. Why? Because if you look at the workforce satisfaction, or engagement service around the world, I don't know if you have noticed, but there are roughly about 70-80% of the people in the global workforce that are disengaged. That's a very high number. Yeah. And kudos to the rest that are engaged. But in the end of the day, why are they disengaged? Yeah. And it starts with, do I have a role that satisfies my needs? Can I learn something? Can I grow? Can I even leverage my skills? Am I seen? Am I appreciated? Yeah, there are a lot of different reasons for this disengagement. But I think what I have seen, the way we recruit is actually broken. And by that I mean is we look at resumes, which are highly biased, probably the most biased document you can get after a LinkedIn profile. Don't say this too loud, right? But so there are biased documents where we judge people on if they are good or not. That's completely nonsense. Another thing is years of experience. Yeah. So we believe, for whatever reason, that if you have 10 years, working in a certain job, you are a master. But we probably all know, based on our experience, that the years of working experience does not predict future job performance. Why? Because somebody can be really bad at their job for multiple years. That does not make them stronger in what they do, right? If they have never been onboarded, educated, guided, mentored in a way to reach excellence, then how should they be capable of knowing what good looks like is? Yeah. So that's one thing, especially for recruiting, for example. Yeah. There is no degree, no certification that says you are a great TA expert, because there's no such thing. There's not an educational background that will help you to say Matthias is a certified TA leader in that area, right? And so this is why our is similar to the word consultant. Everybody is a consultant, but what does that mean, right? So similar with recruitment and TA, there's no certification. So how do you know? And so we have those biases, and the way we look at future job performance, predicting future job performance in hiring processes, this is completely broken. Yeah. So that means we need to start thinking about what is actually predicting future job performance. And I give you examples. I think you mentioned this before our podcast started. You did a work sample test. So you knew, for example, that, hey, these are the tasks that I will execute in my day-to-day in this role. And that gives me a good perception of, do I enjoy working at this company? Do I enjoy solving those problems? And do I even meet people in my team that work with me? Yeah. So there's a lot of benefits into work sample tests, but there's also a lot of value adds in the terms of not just work sample tests, but job knowledge. Yeah. So for example, can we do a little quiz, 20 minutes, besides looking at a resume, to say, how good are you in something? So would you not in product management, say, look, I don't want to send my resume, but I just do a little quiz on the state of art or the product management knowledge. You fill this out, you have fun, you get even the result, get even some feedback for improvement, no matter if you're rejected or you move forward. Isn't that a much better experience for people? And then again, we talk about experience in recruitment, right? And so there are a lot of topics there where you can, in the terms of how we assess talents, change the game. And I think in the past decades, what TA has failed in is candidate experience. Everybody talks about it, nobody fixes it. Assessment, yeah. So we don't, in some areas or in some regions in the world, we don't even see this as a part of talent acquisition. But yes, I mean, look, you need to give your opinion. What I ask always recruiters is like, how does your quality of your pipeline look like? Do you have strong candidates in that pipeline? Will there be six, if A doesn't go, is there a B or a C or like even as great as A, right? And so this is something that is really, really important. And another thing why we need to change is, if we want to be a strategic advisor, or you sometimes hear this, I want to have a seat on the table. Everybody wants to have a seat on the table. But what does that mean? Yeah. What is expected of you? So here is really the topic of not just stakeholder management or relationship building, but how can you help C-levels in organizations to solve their problems to build successful companies? And that's now very generically spoken, but they have a problem. So for example, you say, I'm not happy with the leadership quality in my organization. So what would be my part is to define what leadership looks like and help them to hire people that will uplift the leadership quality within an organization. Yeah. And that is not done by one hire. Don't get me wrong. But with multiple hires, where you then see when suddenly a new leader comes in and everybody is like, oh, he's fantastic. He knows exactly what they are doing. They are fixing problems. Then you will see that the business will achieve certain projects better and will leverage this, right? So here TA can play a big role, because we can have impact into certain cultures by the way we hire, to actually create, I call this always a culture ad. Yeah, there's a long conversation around culture fit versus culture ad. Literally, in the end, it's a definition problem, right? But here I want to hire people that raise the bar with us to achieve the culture we are aiming for. Because we always have a culture, we always have an employer brand, we always have a candidate experience, even if we don't measure it. But in the end of the day, how do you hire people that will raise the bar for you? and then you need to clear that path into excellence. And to the last sentence, to the seat on the table, it is really, really important that you work then with C levels together, CEOs, CTOs, CMOs, whatever you have on your C level, to really make a difference. Make a difference means, look, you have this problem, you have this goal. Let's say we need to increase our revenue growth from 30 million to 60 million. What can TA do to help you there? Yeah. Is it hiring better sales talent? Is it, creating more network opportunities for your salespeople to learn from this? Is it sales enablement, onboarding? Is it internal communications? Is it learning opportunities? There are so many areas. And I think what I've seen a lot of people succeeding in my roles is to just ask for projects, right? A lot of times in the last 2 years, recruitment volume went down, recruitment demands went down. So what else can you do? Be very much like proactive and ask people, how can I help to make the company more successful? Because in the end, if the company is successful, I will benefit from it. Other people will benefit from it. And so on. So many times we are afraid to ask that question. We don't know about that question. And that is something, by asking questions, how can I make a value add, an impact, a contribution to what is happening currently? You will succeed, but you need to ask those questions.
No, that's very true because there are times when hiring is completely frozen. The company said we are not making money, we are not going to hire people. And I have seen some talent acquisition people actually supporting in more people operations, like the normal. I love this approach, not calling HR, but more people operations. Because the thing is, it is all about that these guys, the HR or people operations, need to make sure that the people are happy in the company. And it's a bloody hard task to do. It's really hard task. And because making me happy might be different than making Matthias happy. Even though our name starts with an M.
Yeah, no. But one caveat to this, I would say the happiness score is not just the people's team's responsibility, it's also the leaders, right? Yeah. It's a shared responsibility in all of this. But I do agree with you. There are certain tasks that just need to be excellence. Like there need to be an operational excellence. So, for example, the basics are payroll, right? We want to get paid on time. If I have multiple issues with payrolls, that's a topic that no leader can jump on into, right? But I think with the experience, what I've seen, and there's a Gallup is a huge institute that actually measured this, is we need to focus on how do we enable leaders to be great in what they do, because they increase productivity, they have an influence in the success of the company, and so how can people together with leaders collaborate to create the environments that they are driving for? And I think then I would say that would create happiness. If you say, no, high engagement survey is only the people team would be responsible, that's not flying. That's not going to work.
No, and I agree with you. It's not only the people team, but for example, I have seen a lot of leaders. They are good leaders, but they are always struggling with how can they make their team happy. That is where I have seen the people's team, because they are working with different teams, they have more ideas, and they know the psychology of people. I mean, I can be the best product leader, but sometimes I also struggle with ideas, which is normal, right? So, and then who's my aspiring partner, or who do I go to? The HR or the people operations, because they will come up with cool stuff, and I can share information with them that look, the team outperformed last quarter. I don't want to just throw in some money or take them for a lunch. I want them to have a nice time, like what can we do? And then I have seen this multiple times. The HR or the people team came up with such fancy things and not expensive at all, like creative ideas that we could do in the office, like didn't cost anything. It was less than 100 euros for 5-6 people. I mean, we just had to order food, which was separate, but the actual activity didn't cost us anything. Like we just needed white paper and markers, which are always available. So it was fun to do. Cool.
I totally agree.
You talked about a lot of talent acquisition needs to work with the C-level people and so on, but there is a difference between small companies, like we are talking about startups, 5-10 people or 20 people, and also large corporates. Corporates can afford a lot of people. How can actually these smaller companies compete with these larger entities?
It's very obvious. What startups and scale-ups have a big advantage of is the agility. So what I mean by that is if you change the employer brand, for example, of a corporate of 20,000 people, this is a process that probably takes you a year, if not more. To do this in a startup or a scale-up, it might be 1 quarter. Yeah. Depending, of course, a little bit on other factors, but literally there is a difference in speed and decision making. So that means startups and scale-ups can iterate much faster and can adapt much faster also to certain market conditions in order to attract the right talents or to enhance their practices. Yeah, so that is one advantage. The second advantage is if you have this mindset, this growth mindset of look, we are starting MVP approach, right? Minimal valuable product. You start there, you put it out there, you iterate until you make it perfect. Then I think this is sometimes what I keep on seeing with a lot of people or talent teams. Oh, I over-engineered this. It must be perfect from the first start. And then it takes long time in executing. But why are we not doing a much more iterative approach here? Why can we not, and I did this with my onboarding journey, that we started, we put it out there. There were still some actions that need to be done better, but we iterated with all of the new starters on every week, every second week, every month. And through that, we created now something where I think, it's really solid. It applies for multiple different markets. It creates great experiences. And that is the way going forward. Yeah. So I think this is where startups and scale-ups can be good, because if you have the right mindset, you can make things happen much, much faster than the big ones. Now, let's maybe talk one little topic about the money, because money is always important, right? If I have a 1 million budget versus a 20,000 K or 20K budget, it's a difference. The question is it really, right? Because in the end of the day, what are you spending that money for? Right. What I have seen is, and this is a little bit how I build up my team as well as my environment, is I invest a lot in the right people. So, for example, my team has only seniors, yeah, and they are capable of a lot. Now, the question is, do they need extra money for it? No, they just need the authority to say, what are we trying to fix? How do we prioritize this? And then let's do this, right? And so I have people that have already the skills to do and execute on certain things. So very hands-on, but they have the knowledge. And so we create value without spending money. But at one point, I will then go back and say to the leaders, listen, people, I cannot say this on a podcast, but literally what you put in, you get out, right? So that means if you don't invest, you cannot get the most out of it. So at one point, there's an end to this where you say, well, we'll figure this out, we build things. But if you want a much better result, then especially every performance marketer will probably say yes to this, is in the end, you need to invest in certain channels, right, in order to get a certain result. And so if you do employer branding without spending any money, that's probably not going to fly, right? But I'm not talking about I need 1 million euros to do a great employer branding. It's probably investing in the right channels, and maybe with 50 or 100K, I might be even as effective for the region and the target groups that I want to aim for, right? So I would never make this with a part of the money and the budget I get. A lot of things that you can change in startups can be done in hands-on work, focus work, and you know what you're doing, and you already create an impact.
You mentioned this in the beginning, also during your other answers. It feels like the whole process is iterative, correct? You have been mentioning that. So what are actually some of the best practices for managing and engaging candidates throughout this recruitment cycle?
That's a topic I am very, very passionate about. A lot of people are very narrow-minded by just looking at the interviews that happen, right? They say, oh, this is the interaction, so I invite somebody to an interview, I invite somebody to the next interview, and that's the only opportunity for influence or engagement. That's so not true. Yeah. So the way you prepare candidates, the way you say, hey, how was your interview? What are your takeaways? What have you learned?
Mm.
So when you look at the different steps, and you shouldn't have hopefully not 10 steps, but more like 4 or 5 steps, yeah. Um, what do you do in between the steps will have a huge influence, yeah. How do you engage somebody within that period of time is very important. What we are currently doing even further is having surveys in our career page where they say, even if you apply or not, we'll love to have your feedback on our career page. How good is it? What is interesting? What is not interesting, right? So even start before they even apply. So that means by saying that is you have the interactions and the touch points, how to prepare candidates, how you set them up for success in the interviews, how you follow up with them, how you give them feedback. And if you do this very nicely, then you will probably have a very engaged experience with people. Yeah. And then let's assume somebody gets hired, then this is not over. You will continue to be a partner in that journey to say, look, you have been hired. This is your start date. Oh, we are still working on the visa. Hey, this is what's happening next. Hey, this is when the communication starts. You will be there for people. And it goes back to your question that you said, what are the critical components of a strong employer brand? It's the interaction and how you treat people. It's the experience that you create. Overall, that is something that drives engagement. And sometimes we have seen this right now that people thank us for our process and they had a great time, but they don't join because they have a better offer or something else. But okay, that's fair play, right? Because in the end of the day, they have been treated nicely and they will always remember this. And this is the strongest effort than spending 20K or 50K on LinkedIn with an employer branding campaign, because the interactions of how you treat people will have a spillover effect and that will treat you well.
So
Yeah.
whenever I know someone like who's looking for a job, there are some companies I immediately send them to. Hey, yeah, you know what? Check their page. If there is an opening, I will make the introduction. Worst case, there is no opening, no introduction made. But
Yeah.
best case, they actually go through the process. And then I say, if you find any flaw in their process, right, share it with the people, because they ask me. If they don't, because they want to listen.
100% agree.
You know?
100% agree. And I would go one step further and say we need to create learning opportunities. And it's like our interaction right now in this podcast. If we haven't learned anything from our conversation today, how good of a conversation was it, right? Because that's then something where other people listen to this and they might be like, look, there were a couple of key takeaways that I found super interesting. And that's why I remember this or refer this to somebody else because there was a real podcast or there was a, great opportunity or, hey, I want to follow this guy because he seems like he knows what he's doing, right? So I think the learning opportunity, and this is what you see across the I wouldn't say the world, but the markets at the minute. People want to upskill, people want to learn, people want to grow. And if you have an environment, especially in the early careers, where it's not so much about the money, it's about what can you learn to become something better, a better version of yourself. This is the relationships you want to have with people, right? Because if I know I can have a relationship with someone that helps me to grow over the course of time, that is the person that I want to be with.
So, because we're also coming towards an end, right? So, what advice would you give job seekers who are navigating the digital job market today, considering there are so many layoffs, but also so many people hiring?
One thing that has not to do with your resume, right? Let's start with the more deeper questions that you should ask yourself is, what is the perfect environment for you? What values does the company need in order for you to say that's an exciting place? What are your values, maybe to begin with, right? I see sometimes people, they are like, yeah, I'm looking for a place where, the values are aligned with mine. And then you ask, okay, what are your values? And they'll be like, yeah, that's a good question. It's like, okay, look, if you want to find something that satisfies you, then really think deeply about what is important for me. What is the environment that I'm driving in? What kind of leadership do I need? Yeah. I know that sounds like, hey, this is not an employee market. It's probably turned into a more of an employer market because of all of the layers and insecurities and stuff. But it's still questions that you need to ask yourself. Because I do believe that if you want to make an educated decision, it's similar to some people in my team say, recruiting is like dating, Matthias, right? And it's like to private life as well. You need to understand what relationships do you want to get engaged with, what kind of people do you want next to you, and you need to make that list in order to, first of all, start with yourself. What is it that I want and what is it that I don't want? And then really go then the next step, right? Because then let's assume you have done this and you know exactly what you're looking for. Then the next question is a little bit, okay, how do I find out if I have my values, what are the companies that actually are next to this, to my values, to my value system? And that's probably something LinkedIn hasn't come up with yet, to say, I want to search for those values, and that's why go for it. But it's actually not true, because what I have seen with LinkedIn right now, I don't know if you have this, I think it's a premium version. What LinkedIn does now these days is, if you look for jobs, you can then filter D&I jobs, for example. So that is interesting. What does that mean? It's like companies who value D&I, here are jobs that from companies that focus on this, or hey, here are jobs in different industries, or here are jobs where learning is important, or so we're getting into this direction where already big platforms like LinkedIn are creating a different perspective to job search. But what I would do if I were you is say, look, I will identify a list of like 10 to 15 companies that I did proper research of, and that I saw this is a company, that's a culture that I will drive in, and even go a next step and say, let me connect with some people in this organization and say, I find your organization very interesting, but I'm not sure like if it's the right culture. Is this what you're selling yourself towards to? Is this actually that you live internally? Do your due diligence as well. Now, this sounds like a lot of different steps to actually do this, but what I'm trying to get into is like, you need to do a bit more due diligence on the company side. You should not spray and pray. We always say this in recruitment. Oh, I put all of my jobs somewhere and then I'm just waiting for people to apply. That's spray and pray, right? No, do a more sophisticated job in your research, in your due diligence, because then you will follow the right companies. Then you're not sending out lots of applications. And then when it comes to the point where you say, I have identified 10 companies, I like them, look of what openings they have. And if they don't have an opening, which is also happening, then it's something where I would be like, connect to the leaders in this organization. Say, hey, Matthias, I really like what you're doing. If there's ever an open opportunity or job in your team, please let me know. Please reach out. I follow your content, right? So be close to the people you want to work with in the future. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's a network thing. And then I think also is, not everybody has the luxury of waiting until forever to find the dream job, right? So that means at one point you need to get going. But this is also then start thinking a little bit of what do I want to achieve in the future? So do I want to become a chief talent officer? Do I want to be a freelancer or whatever, an influencer or so? But whatever it is, that you want to achieve, then look at your game plan of how do I get there myself, right? Because a lot of times what I've seen with employees is, oh, my leader is responsible for my growth. No, you are responsible for your growth, and the leader can support you if the leader knows where you want to go. So, and I think this is also when they then interview, strong from people to say, look, these are my values. This is my game plan. This is what I want to achieve. And if you come across like this with a plan, with something you have thought about, you will make a strong impression to people, because then the leader can ask myself, can I help this person to fulfill their dreams? And is actually the opportunity the right one? And I think for me, what I have learned, and this is maybe last advice to people who are searching at the minute, is really think about in which part of your career you're in. Are you really learning in the beginning of your career?
Mm.
Then how much does money play a role? How much does, fancy jobs, fancy benefits play a role? Or is it more, is there an area where I can get started, iterate, and try to grow? Because we all know jobs are not forever. Yeah, especially not in our environment. And I think I just recently got a feedback. It was very funny that people said, "Oh, you're changing quite a lot." I was like, "Yeah, but do you know why?" Right? Because there are maybe sometimes reasons for this, and you need to look a little bit more beyond the resume. But in the end of the day, what I'm trying to say here is, focus on how to get there, and maybe sometimes an entry level job, even if it's not the perfect job, will help you for your next step in your career. So don't treat it like, oh, I'm just looking for the perfect job, because there's no perfect job. There is no perfect company. The grass is not always greener somewhere else. Yeah. And sometimes it's an okay job, but it's probably the right step for you to make the next step in your career. Right. And I think people need to also think about this a little bit more in intense. So for me personally, for example, taking another director role in this area would be the fourth time I'm doing this. That's getting boring for me. So I would probably not accept someone reaching out to me and say, Matthias, we want to hire you as a head of or a director for this role. And I'm like, no, people, please don't. Yeah, but it's a bigger role and they give you more money. It's like, so what, right? So it's really about being mindful about where you are, what you need to do next, and do your due diligence on your side. So many times I've seen that candidates didn't do this.
No, that's all true. I've seen people who are like also very picky. Like the employers are picky and also the employees are picky that no, I need these 10 points to be fulfilled. But then there is no company offering these 10 points. Do you sit unemployed? So you have to make compromise. Like you said, that's an example I'm going to be using. Working is like dating. Before we used to say it's like marriage, but it's more like dating. But my final question that I have today: where do you see talent acquisition heading, let's say, in the future?
Great question. For me, talent acquisition will not be talent acquisition anymore. That means everyone that believes the only job of talent acquisition is recruiting people, also in the next 5 to 10 years, I think they are completely wrong. Recruiting will be something like in the future that is an operational excellence things. It's like creating contracts. Yeah, it's part of your core skill of your role, but it's not your main and only task anymore, right? So where I see this, and that's why I said talent acquisition moves to talent, we will see much more responsibility on topics that are very much connected to our practices. So that means talent acquisition, sure. Employer branding, yes. Onboarding, internal mobility. I have at the minute internal communication, maybe something that's very unusual for part of my practices. Yeah, it could very much be L&D, talent development, talent management in general, right? Some people I see, they call this talent success, right? So it could also very much be performance management in the end, right? So depending a little bit on your organization, I think the scope will really increase. I would also say we haven't talked about, we have talked about data, but like, look, it could also be people analytics. It could also be talent intelligence. Yeah, there are books about functions like that make a lot of sense, especially for growing companies where you understand and market map the environments in the countries that you have in order to make the decision where we open up the new office and which market and which talents do I get. So many times I've seen a poor decision making in where do I open up an office because there was the assumption that there's cheap talent that has a high quality, but look, guys, the compensation world has shifted and changed completely over the last 2 to 3 years. So don't think that there's cheap talent out there. It's not. It's not, right? And I think this is something where we can play a much bigger part. But that is also with a caveat to the people team, right? Because if we play a bigger role in certain other topics, we'll take away certain roles and tasks from people teams. And in startups and scale-ups, that's fine because you have never a complete vanished team. But in bigger organizations, I could see this being a bit of a problem because, then you would probably take away other roles from someone else. And this is a great opportunity for a CHRO to say then, look, do I really need so many people? Or can I not just change the scopes and responsibilities and then have less people, but they are more effective in what they do?
And also from the other side, not from talent acquisition, I come from the product side, right? So I can actually connect with the points that you mentioned, like the talent acquisition role evolving in the future. That's how project manager role evolved into product manager, and now product manager is also evolving into a different role, where product marketing manager and a product manager who's responsible for development, because it is always evolving. So roles need to evolve to see what is the demand of the market. Like now there
100%.
is a new role also, product operations, completely new. Like it's like 10 years ago there was nothing called product
Yeah.
operations. We only had project manager, and a few companies had product managers. And now you see new roles coming up as well, and the evolvement of a product manager as well. But
Yeah, and maybe one last topic about this, and it's so good that you say that, and that's why I enjoy the conversation so much, because I talk to a product person, is you need to think about talent acquisition or talent as a product. Start thinking about it as a product, and what you just mentioned is we have the same thing. We have rec ops or talent ops. These terminologies exist, and it's been taken from product or design or other engineer ops as well, DevOps, right? So these concepts apply for a lot of different areas here. And this is something where I see this evolving a bit more in the future. So when I hired somebody for my team, I looked at especially a rec ops focus, somebody that can leverage technology and is capable to get the data and the analysis in order to achieve certain goals. And 100%, yeah.
Cool. No, that's very valuable. But thank you so much for joining today, Matthias. It was very much fun, and it was truly inspiring and also very insightful. Is there something you would like to say as a closing remark for our listeners?
Oh, final last words. I would say for me, what is very, very important is everyone in the organization, let's all together start to treat people nicely and are more people focused, because I think for me, what I have seen is, and I still wonder sometimes, there are so many toxic working environments there where people are pressured or don't treat people well. And this is something where I'm like, look, can we not just start, be more respectful and interact with people in order to achieve growth? That is my last final words there.
So thank you again, Matthias. To our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in to the Executives. And if you found this episode valuable, or if you agree or disagree with Matthias, do leave a comment. And also you will have the LinkedIn from him, so you can connect with him, and also argue with him if you don't agree. And don't forget to subscribe and also share it with your network. This is until next time. This is Majid signing off.